You only save what you love, and you only love what you know.
What does collaborative conservation mean to you?
What everybody in the conservation world is working for is what we define as impact. But to do that takes many, many hands. Lighthawk acts as a force multiplier.
On this episode, I am joined by Jim Becker, an aviator with over 60 years of experience in everything from C-130s to gliders.
You would not believe the number of people that we've taken up in our Lighthawk airplanes for the first time, and they go, my God, I never realized what you could see from 2,000 feet above the ground.
Today, as CEO of Lighthawk, Jim leads one of the most purpose-driven flying organizations in the world.
The Mexican wolves were down about 10 or 11 existing in the world. You know, that population was right at the border of going extinct, and we brought it back.
Using general aviation to protect wildlife, watersheds, and wild landscapes.
The aroma of 5 wild wolves in that airplane is something I will never forget.
Yeah, I don't think I want to be in a 172 with a wolf in the backseat. Jim's story is about how flying evolves and how it can ultimately leave a lasting impact.
We put them up in a Lighthawk flight. The donor saw how wonderful that piece of land would be if it were properly preserved. He came down and he wrote a $3 million check.
Whether you want to find inspiration for your flying or get involved in conservation, this episode is for you. 3, 2, 1. All right.
All right. Let's go.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for coming all the way down to Austin today.
It's absolutely a pleasure.
We're going to cover your past in aviation, your present with Lighthawk, and where it goes from here. I always like to ask first, what was your first taste of aviation?
Well, one of my earliest memories when I was 5 years old was hanging onto the yoke in my father's A-26 as a couple of gentlemen tried to pull me out of there. I didn't want to leave. My dad was a decorated Korean War pilot. And then you fast forward till when I was 15 and I had my first lesson, which was in an Aranca Champ, you know, the most basic airplane. It had no electrical system. They had to hand throw the prop to start it. And we went around and flew, and then I went to do my first landing, and I greased it, absolute greaser. And I thought, well, hey, maybe this isn't so hard. And then the next one, I think I dropped in from 3 feet. I don't think we broke the airplane, but that started the lifelong learning process that has continued forever.
Well, did you have any sense of where aviation would take you?
My father was involved in aviation, and we were always around aviation. I grew up in Cleveland, and Cleveland was, for a long time, one of the centers of aviation in the country. You had the Cleveland Air Races, which were the predecessors to Reno, and I can actually remember the celebrations on the 50th anniversary of flight in 1953. So it was always there. Did I really know how involved I would be with with aviation for the rest of my life? No, it wasn't until later on when things began to really gel. The real magic happened in my first solo flight, as it does for so many pilots. I was flying out of Post Mills Airport in Vermont, which is a little grass strip in Vermont, and with Air Force ROTC, they give you 40 hours of flying while you're in school. You're up there, and you have the White Mountains on one side, the Green Mountains on the other side, the Connecticut River Valley there, and it's all yours, and you're totally responsible for the airplane.
And you said that was during ROTC that you started that training, yeah?
I was in ROTC at Dartmouth College and in 69 and 70, and that's they give you 40 hours to fly, and that's where I did that.
And was that your introduction to your military career later on?
That was the start. I joined ROTC to get into the Air Force. I then flew on active duty for about 3 years, and then with the reserves for about another 10 or 12 years. You have a year of pilot training, which I highly recommend. You get 1 year where in the morning you fly wonderful aircraft, in the afternoon you go to ground school, and the next week you fly in the afternoon and go to ground school in the morning. You get to do that for a year. You have fantastic instructors, great airplanes, and you get paid to do it. So that year of pilot training is probably more fun than you'll ever have again. But then out of pilot training, I flew C-130s, wonderful airplane. It's been in production longer than any other airplane in the world. 4-engine turboprop. It was designed by Kelly Johnson from the Skunk Works, and his basic design parameter was to take a railroad boxcar, hold it in an airplane, and he put this beautiful high aspect ratio wing on it and 4 very powerful turboprop engines. It's a great airplane. At one point, every free world Air Force had C-130s, yeah.
And what role did you kind of specifically fill while you were flying those?
So the C-130 was, I've had a tour in Vietnam. It was what we call the in-country transport. You know, the 141s would bring all the stuff to Cam Bay or to Tan Son Nhut, and then we would distribute it all across the country.
And where did that flying take you, after that career? You said you went to the reserves.
I flew in the reserves out of Westover Air Force Base, and we would rotate to England, and from England we would fly down as far as Turkey,
Wow.
All through the Middle East and all through Europe. We actually trained for the Berlin corridor flight when that was still before the wall came down.
Yeah.
Never flew it, but we actually trained for it. The beauty of the C-130 was you got into a lot of very different places.
Yeah.
You weren't going airbase to airbase. You were going into a lot of really interesting small fields. I can remember we had a series of missions to resupply the listening posts in Turkey that were listening to Russia at that time. And there was one out by a very old city called Becker, which had walls that were built 1,000 years before Christ. And the airfield there, we would make a low pass to scare away the sheep that were grazing on the runway.
God.
Then we would land, offload our supplies. So the C-130 had a lot of very fascinating and interesting missions. It was a great airplane to fly.
Was it kind of a shock going back into general aviation after flying such a cool aircraft and missions?
It was. When I got out of the reserves and I wanted to fly, I was working for a company that had a very large flying club, and they had a bonanza that you could join for $5,000. And I thought, my goodness, a bonanza for $5,000 entry? Well, it was a C-35 bonanza, which was, I think, the 4th year they were produced. I bought into it. And then when I finally did looked at the specs, I found that I could fly my family as far as Philadelphia before I had to refuel.
Yeah.
So I sold my shares in that, and eventually we bought Aztecs.
And was there something that time in the service, I mean, obviously it taught you how to fly, but
Right.
did it kind of give you a different aspect of flying that you took with you into your GA flying?
I think I got the best training in the world, in the Air Force. And that stays with you your whole career in aviation. So you just approach your flying, even if it's just for the $100 hamburger, you approach it with a rigor that you will never let go of.
Besides just the type of aircraft you're flying, was there a shock in maybe not having a mission for your flying anymore? Like you mentioned, the $100 hamburger is kind of what
Right.
a lot of people think of as what to do with their airplanes. Was that an adjustment as well, like not having these kind of set up missions?
That was a bit of an adjustment, but we used it for the Aztecs were great traveling machines. And so I flew my family. In that sense, you had that mission. But yeah, then you get into the 172s and you say, what am I going to do with this airplane? Yeah.
So you and your wife are part of a pretty small club
Right.
with an interesting characteristic. Can you tell me about that?
That's a great story. I met my wife the first day at business school. We both went to Talk Up at Dartmouth, and she was a pilot already. She had her pilot's license. She had just gotten it before she came up there, and she became a high-powered consultant. And one time she was in England, and it was cheaper to send her back in the Concorde than it was to pay for another day of her time in England. So she got to fly in the Concorde. So both Mimi and I have flown supersonic, and she tells me that, hey, I flew faster than you did because they get up to Mach 2. And I said, yeah, but I flew the airplane. She talks about the window was hot in the Concorde because from the friction that it was moving so fast, and you're high enough to see the curvature of the earth. So it was and you're also drinking Dom Perignon and have filet mignon. She said it was a wonderful experience.
And then your supersonic time was in
In the T-38, in your Air Force training, you get one ride where you're allowed to push the throttles up and keep the afterburners going and watch that Mach meter go beyond 1.
Well, if I had to pick one, it'd be a hard choice, but man, the Concorde would be hard to.
The Concorde.
hard to pass up. That's super cool. That's definitely rare air in the both in the Concorde, people that got to ride on that, and just going supersonic in general. That's a small crew out of an already small crew.
I told my wife a long time ago that if getting to orbit ever got below $100,000, I was selling everything we had and going. It's wonderful to have a pilot in the family.
Well, I want to back up a little bit. We skipped over something super interesting in your background, which is your work in college on navigation systems. Can you tell me a little bit about that work that you did?
My father was an aviator. He had a Skymaster, Cessna Skymaster, the famous push-pull airplane. And I would fly with him all over the country, and I noticed that he was always tuning VORs, which was the navigation system that everybody used to find their way around the airspace. He was always tuning them and cross-referencing them to get his exact location. I thought, well, maybe we can do better than that. And so for my undergraduate thesis, I ended up designing the first digital VOR. All VORs at that time were analog. The obvious way to do it is to count the time, because the time is in degrees. But to have an accurate clock was very expensive for a long time. I figured out how to make a very inexpensive clock. That electronics technology had advanced to the point where it was obvious how to do it. We did it. We got a patent on it. And that methodology of reading VORs is in every handheld and every airplane today. It's the basic concept of how you do that. And that was a lot of fun. And then for my graduate work, I built on that, and I built the first digital RNAV system that had existed. Before that, again, they were all analog, and I used Intel's first microprocessor, a 4-bit microprocessor, and made it do trigonometric calculations. That device was advanced enough that it won the William B. Jackson Award from the ROTC, the Radio Technical Commission for Aeronautics, which is the governing body for all the avionics in the world.
It's so interesting to hear these kind of shifts in the history of aviation, because relatively speaking, it's a pretty young industry, and a lot of these like transformative changes in how we fly have happened pretty recently.
And then, of course, I stepped away from intensive involvement in aviation for about 20 years as the family did other things. And when I came back to it, GPS was there, ForeFlight was there, the glass panels had just started to arrive. It just changed the whole nature of the process. It's really fun to watch it.
Do you feel like there are things that have carried over, though, like old habits you still have, or have you fully embraced the new way?
I'm still quite comfortable flying steam gauges.
Yeah.
But the rigor that you approach it, that always stays, no matter what is in the airplane. Yeah.
Sure.
The preparation, the thinking, the decision-making.
Can you describe to me what is aviation conservation?
Aviation conservation is using general aviation aircraft to advance conservation causes across the country, to help all the people and all the organizations that are trying to preserve our environment, to help them be more efficient and more effective. There's two parts to it, really. One is, if you want to know what is going on in the environment, the best place to understand that is from 1,000 to 4,000 feet above the ground. You have the viewpoint that you can see what is going on. And that, as pilots, we all take that for granted. But you would not believe the number of people that we've taken up in our Lighthawk airplanes for the first time, and they go, my God, I never realized what you could see from 2,000 feet above the ground. So there's that whole aspect, and that really was the basis of what we call conservation flying. And then what has come up in probably the last 10 years is the fact that we're trying to save various endangered species, ranging from bobwhite quail all the way up to wolves. Being able to transport them around the country is an absolute critical necessity. And so that's become another capability that we use general aviation for.
So we're going to talk a lot about the many missions and partners you guys have at Lighthawk, but I want to know, what is conservation? What are some of the efforts that people maybe don't know about?
It's what's going on with our rivers, our lakes, our freshwater, what's going on with the land. Is it being protected? Is it being preserved? That mine that we critically need the minerals from, is it going in a place that isn't going to pollute your river? So there's many, many different aspects of understanding what's going on the ground and everything that is on the ground. We do a lot of that. Most people would say, oh, okay, that's really interesting. But they don't instinctively recognize it. The transporting endangered species is something everybody gravitates to. But most of our flights are actually to help people understand what is going on the ground, whether it's counting pronghorns so that the Native American tribes can hand out the right number of tickets, or chasing down condors that have gone missing. We're really looking at what's going on all over the surface of the earth.
Bringing Lighthawk into that where does the history of Lighthawk start? Maybe tell people what it is and how it started, and then we'll go into where we are today.
Lighthawk's actually been around for 46, 47 years now, so which is for a nonprofit organization, that's a long half-life. But it started with a single pilot down in the desert Southwest. A gentleman named Michael Stewart, he found out that a coal-fired plant was going to go into a very ecologically sensitive area near him. He had an airplane. He started taking up his friends, showing them what was going to happen, and then he started taking up newspaper journalists and photographers and county commissioners. And sure enough, the plant never got permitted because people could see what was going to happen if this went in there. And that was the genesis of Lighthawk. And he then struggled for several years to grow it, did a wonderful job. Eventually it took hold and has grown to the point where we now have 250 volunteer pilots all across the country who are ready to fly conservation missions. Probably over the last 4 or 5 years, we've worked with over 400 different organizations.
So just to put it all in one place, Lighthawk is a volunteer pilot organization where people who own or have access to aircraft volunteer their time and pilot skills to enable conservation.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And their time and the cost of operating those aircraft. So when we go to a conservation organization that needs to get up in the air to see what is going on, we tell them it's at no cost to you. It's not a free flight because obviously the pilots are covering that cost, but we tell them it's at no cost to the organization. And that allows the magic to happen because most of them are not-for-profits and everybody works on a tight budget.
I mean, that's something to feel great about as a pilot as well. I mean, everyone knows it's an expensive hobby, but to have a purpose behind it beyond just going to get maybe what used to be $100 hamburger, I don't know what it is now, but probably a little more than 100. But yeah, just to have that mission and feel like you're contributing to something bigger than yourself is invaluable.
It is, and that's the reason pilots come to Lighthawk. The basic rule that you have to fly. If you have an airplane, you've got to fly to be safe. There's proficiency and currency issues there. And so you're always, most general aviation pilots are always looking for a reason. And when we say, hey, you can do what you love and still help preserve the world for your kids, your grandkids, their eyes light up and they say, how can I resist that? Very often our pilots will come down after a mission and they'll say, this is the best use of my airplane. It's a very satisfying and gratifying experience for our pilots. The other side of it is in almost every mission, you're flying with somebody else. You're flying with a scientist, an ecologist, a biologist who's an expert on the topic you're going to fly for. And so the pilot comes away learning a lot about what's going on, and they will say that's one of the best reasons to go fly.
And I imagine the missions that they embark on probably become pretty personal. It's in their local area. It's probably somewhere that they're familiar with, or I'm sure the efforts of the conservationists as well become something they become invested in just by being alongside them in the air.
Absolutely, and we think of a 500-mile radius for every pilot as that's probably their service area. And as you mentioned, really all conservation is local. So people would love to contribute to preserving what they know and where they live.
One of your tenets is you believe in collaborative conservation. And we've touched on this a little bit, as pilots go on their missions and they learn more about these efforts. What does collaborative conservation mean to you?
What everybody in the conservation world is working for is what we define as impact. The species survives, the land's preserved, the rivers run clean. But to do that takes years and takes many, many hands. No one organization can claim that they made this happen because there's hundreds of people. And what Lighthawk does is Lighthawk acts as a force multiplier for a lot of those organizations. We can make you more efficient and more effective. And so that's our collaboration. If you have a good reason to get up in the air, we will make that happen. And we will work with photographers, journalists that have a good environmental story to tell. We will collaborate with almost any organization that is rationally working on what we want to do.
Did you find conservation through Lighthawk, or was that kind of the other way around? Were you already into Lighthawk, and then conservation was this world that you were just suddenly thrown into?
That's the way it happened. I'm current in my 172, and I'm trying to find good excuses to go flying, and going down to Katama and Martha's Vineyard is great, and going to the beach. You can only do so much of that. And then my good friend, Bud Sittig, who was at that time just chairman of the board of Lighthawk, and Bud was also a brigadier general in the Colorado Air National Guard. And Bud didn't so much make requests as give very polite suggestions.
Sure.
And Bud said, "Jim, I want you to be on the board of Lighthawk." And my reaction was, what is Lighthawk? Yeah. So I've been in this business for over 50 years at that point, and I didn't know what Lighthawk was. They explained to me that you can do what you love and still kind of move the needle on conservation. How could you resist, right?
Sure.
So that's how I came to conservation flying, and that's how a lot of our pilots are doing that.
Yeah, I'm sure that's an experience for a lot of people. It's this whole world they didn't know existed, and it's impossible to not be captivated by it.
We have a fairly stiff requirement. You have to have 1,000 hours of PIC time before we bring you on board. By the time you get 1,000 hours, you've done most of the silly and stupid and dangerous things you're going to do. So you're a much safer pilot, and our accident record proves that, which has been very good. We now are finding people will come to us with 1,012 hours. They said, I knew about Lighthawk. I wanted to fly for Lighthawk, and I was waiting till I got to that 1,000-hour mark, and there I am.
And so you joined the board, and then what was that journey like to you're now serving as CEO?
I was on the board for several years, and then at one point, the current CEO had to step down very quickly because of some very severe health reasons. And the board said, "Jim, could you fill in for a short while?" And we discovered that short while has been much longer. So I've been doing that for about 3 years. I had done several startups beforehand, so I was used to working with small organizations and helping them grow.
Well, as we say in the software industry, nothing is more permanent than temporary code. So
right.
That's kind of the same.
Right, exactly.
Was there something surprising about that role as CEO that you didn't anticipate?
One of the pleasant surprises was that the passion that so many of our volunteer pilots had for this. I mean, you think out, well, okay, they want to find a good use for flying, but that evolves into, I want to fly a mission because I really love doing what I'm doing. Yeah. And you get some very sophisticated pilots. We've got one of our volunteer pilots who flies 5, 6, maybe 10 missions a year for us, is an ex-astronaut. He's got 900 hours in space. Okay, he almost meets our requirement just with his space time, and he keeps signing up for missions. He wants to fly. We've got Stephanie Wells, one of our pilots. He has 4,000 hours in T-38s, which is a supersonic jet trainer. She worked for NASA and taught a lot of the non-pilot astronauts how to fly, and she comes back every year to fly with us. So we've got an amazing community of pilots there, and they are really passionate about what they're doing. We will put a mission out on our mission board, and it's not uncommon to get 5 or 6 pilots saying, I'm available. And on occasion we get a note back, say, look, I haven't had a flight in several months. Come on, folks. So that was a wonderful surprise, was the passion that folks have brought to it.
Can you tell me a bit about that process of matching pilots to missions?
We have a software package that's an implementation actually of Salesforce. And I have several websites where a conservation partner, for instance, the Nature Conservancy, all down to a small land trust or a zoo, or somebody needs a flight. And usually they have known about us from previous times, and they will go to our website and request a flight. And then one of our program managers, we have 4 program managers, all of them have master's degrees in environmental sciences of some kind. So they're the real environmental side of it. They will evaluate that request and decide whether it's appropriate, because we are burning carbon, to do these missions. So you want to make sure that those trade-offs are appropriate. Once they've done that, they will put it out on our mission board, which is another website the pilots have access to. And usually we have 30 or 40 missions, sometimes as many as 60 out there. And the pilots can look at that, and they will also get an email if they're in the area that this flight is available. And they sign up. There's a lot of coordination between the partner and the pilot, and the program manager for that flight makes sure the pilot has the weight and balance, so they know the weight of all the people they're going to fly, that the passengers have all signed the appropriate waivers, and that all the issues are ticked and tied. They get them together for a discussion. The pilot looks at the suggested route of flight, and the pilot may say, well, this is restricted airspace. We can't go through that. Or the pilot may say, you're a photographer. You want the best sun angle you can get, so let's do that in the morning as opposed to the afternoon. So the pilot has a lot of input into the actual flight. The day it happens, our program manager is tracking them on FlightAware, make sure they get off okay and make sure they land okay. And then there's a lot of follow-up to capture the results of the mission.
Yeah.
So there's a fair amount of work involved in every one of these flights.
I'm sure. And then is there kind of an ongoing relationship if, a conservation effort has something they want to do every couple months? Is that something a pilot would then stay with that conservation effort, or is it truly like a rotating base of...
It's both. In some instances, the pilot builds such a relationship with the person that they're flying. The next time that person wants a flight, they first call the pilot.
Yeah.
And then the pilot, we got to do this with Lighthawk. Or sometimes we will have just a series of flights that are open to anybody.
It's so cool to hear that diverse background of pilots too. Like the expertise, both on the pilot side and on the conservation side, like everyone has something to learn.
And we appreciate the ForeFlight licenses that you folks give to all of our program managers. They use them to plan out the flights. But the pilot community in Lighthawk is just amazing. We probably have enough CFIs to start the largest flight school in the country. And we have airline pilots, military pilots, but the core of our pilots are just GA pilots with a 182.
Well, it's so interesting to hear that rich history of Lighthawk. And I'm sure there have been so many things that have changed about the way that you guys serve these different efforts, but what are the things you've seen stay the same kind of in the ethos of Lighthawk over that history?
The thing that is the kind of the grounding attribute of Lighthawk is get people up in the air. And, it goes back to that wonderful saying that you only save what you love and you only love what you know. The best way for somebody to learn about the Earth is to see it from 2,000 to 4,000 feet. You can't get that in an airliner, and you can't get that standing on the ground. If you want to understand what's going on with this river, you can stand at the bank and you can see, a couple hundred yards, but we can put you up over that whole river in a couple of hours, and you get a much better understanding. And that concept has really stayed with Lighthawk from the begining.
Yeah, and after thousands of missions, hundreds of partners.
Over 10,000 missions is what we've flown, yeah.
Yeah, it's remarkable.
Yeah, and we've probably had, our pilots come, and then with 1,000 hours, we have generally an older group of pilots, so they age out. We've probably over the lifetime had about 600 pilots fly for Lighthawk. Right now, we have about 200 active pilots.
And that's distributed all across the United States,
all
Canada,
across the country. And a few in Canada and a few in Alaska.
And then where do you see kind of the immediate next steps of Lighthawk? Is it increasing the amount of conservation partners you guys have? I'm sure there's always room for more pilots, or is it a bit of both?
It's a bit of both. And one reason we're so happy to do this is because reaching out to pilots is something we need to do a lot more of. There's over 30,000 not-for-profits and organizations in this country that say that we're involved in the environment.
Yeah.
And you winnow that down to ones that would be appropriate for Lighthawk to work with, and there's about 3,000. Working with 400, which is a good, wonderful number, we've only scratched the surface there. So one of the things we're starting next year is a much more intensive outreach to more conservation organizations. We've started to do a lot of work with our Native American tribes. Our program manager from the West went to the council meeting that involves all the land managers of all the tribes. There were about 500 people there. She had a table there and was talking to the people about what services we could offer. And one of them asked, well, what do you charge? And she said, we do this at no charge to you. And he stepped back. He said, you're going to be really busy.
Yeah.
And we have been. We've been doing a lot more work with the tribes. And the other thing that we're working on is to expand the way we gather data from the airplanes. We're looking at the different modalities, multispectrum analysis, LiDAR, and that has just come into the capability of what you can hang on the strut of an airplane. And we're partnering with companies who have the expertise there and have the back-end processing capability to do that.
So that's just another one of the changes kind of in the whole aviation space is these new tools are incredible that you can just bolt them on an airplane and gather amazing data.
That's right. And it has just become possible to do that. So we're excited about that because so much of what we do is what's going on the land, and those different modalities actually give you some very sophisticated views about what's going on. One of our pilots does a lot of flying for the cities and the towns around Los Angeles. He's got a couple of very special cameras in his Bonanza, and he can evaluate the foliage all around the city.
Wow.
Because, as you know, a lot of the outlying communities have had to restrict how much foliage you can have around your house.
Yeah.
And we can do that from the air. You talk to the fire departments, and they said, there was just no way we could enforce this. But now we can give them the data and the information they need.
Well, I want to hear some more about some of these amazing missions you guys have embarked on. Are there any that kind of come to mind in recent or maybe distant memory that were special to you or ones that you were a part of?
I've been involved in a lot of our transport missions. And so transporting everything from bobwhite quail to wolves. And I spent last January working on a lot of transports of wolves. And that was a profound experience because you look into that crate and you realize there's a very intelligent creature looking back at you. And that animal is thinking, well, if I could get out of this crate, we'd have a different conversation than what we're having right now. But you realize that mankind has incredible power over them to preserve them or to destroy them. And it reminds you that all the major religions of the world basically have a tenet that humankind is supposed to be the stewards of all the animals on this earth. And it was a very profound moment. It made me really think about how we're doing this in our world.
And what was that experience like of loading a bunch of wolves into what kind of aircraft you were in?
It was a Pilatus PC-12,
Oh, cool.
which was probably the only airplane you can do that with because they've got that big door.
Yeah, I don't think I want to be in a 172 with a wolf in the back seat.
You couldn't get the wolf crates in there. The aroma of 5 wild wolves in that airplane is something I will never forget.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah, it was really interesting. And the wolves actually are very quiet in the airplanes because they're very intelligent. They figured out they're comfortable. They've got water, they've got what they need. They figured out I can't do anything right now. But when they're released, they bolt out of that crate. They go lickety-split to the tree line, and they turn around and look at you and say, "What have you done?" Yeah. So interesting experience.
And was there a reason for that mission in particular where general aviation really fit better than any other means of transport?
General aviation is the only way you can do that right now. And that's actually ranges across the whole endangered species spectrum, everything from black-footed ferrets to quail to whooping cranes to condors. There's no other way to transport those animals. And most people don't realize it, but wild animals experience stress much more violently than humans do. And you can kill the animal if you stress it too much. You can't just give it a Valium and say, hey, cool it. When we are participating in capture and transport, the veterinarians are there and they're saying, you can only hold that wolf for 2 days. If you can't transport it and get it to its new environment in 2 days, you got to let it go. Yeah. Because you can kill the animal with stress. I was in one flight where the wolf had sat on the tarmac at Atlanta for a day because the airlines couldn't get it scheduled. And that was at the point that we said, we're just not going to let that happen anymore.
So the time-sensitive nature of a lot of these missions is another reason that GA is so well-suited.
And that's the other thing is you have to move, in many instances, you have to move with the reproductive cycle of these animals. Yeah. And the flexibility that general aviation gives you is really the only way you can do it. And many of the organizations we work with say, without Lighthawk, we can't do this. We just can't do it.
Well, I want to hear some more about some of the stories that I read while looking through your background. One that really stood out was, correct me if I'm wrong, it was sea turtles.
Yes. In New England, in Cape Cod, particularly in that everybody knows Cape Cod has this hook. as the weather turns cold, the turtles will normally head south, but if they get captured in that bay, the water gets cold, and the turtles are very sensitive to that. And so then the aquariums will pick them up because they're stunned. They could wash ashore and they're stunned. They will nurse them back to health, but this is hundreds of turtles. And then what you need to do, the aquarium can only deal with so many, so we fly them south. And those are our turtle flights. I forget exactly the name of the turtle, but you can fly, 30 or 40 or 50 of them at a time. And sometimes it's a huge turtle that's a couple 100 pounds, and you can only put one of them in the airplane at a time.
And is that something you guys do on a yearly basis, or?
We have just started doing that. And there are other organizations that do that as well. But the aquarium came to us and said, could you give us a hand this year?
Wow.
So we'll probably do that going forward. We do a lot of work monitoring animals. We down in the Everglades, the manatees are at risk. So we will often fly to look for the manatees so that the biologist knows where they are, and they can make sure that things are going well, and so that the nutrients that the manatees have to eat are growing properly. Any creature that you can monitor from the air, Lighthawk does. One of the more interesting ones is we monitor the eagles and the golden eagles out in the desert Southwest for the Navajo tribes. We fly the tribal elders along the cliffs so they can count the eagles and make sure that the eagles are prospering, because the eagles are very important to their particular culture. We have one pilot who has a Maul, which is a great airplane for flying slow, and he does that flight almost every year.
That's great. So they just go and fly near the cliffs and where the eagles are soaring, and is that an ongoing count every year they do that?
They do that every year.
Wow.
Usually in the spring, I think.
Yeah, another story that stood out to me was white abalone. Was this on the West Coast, you told me?
This was on the Pacific Coast. Abalone, white abalone are a delicacy. I don't know, maybe 20 years ago, they began to get on all the menus in the restaurants. And it turns out all you need to harvest abalone was a wetsuit, a scuba set, and what they called an abalone iron. And you could go out and make a fair amount of money.
And these are snails, right?
They're big snails, right? They have a hard shell. They got over-harvested, so they were almost extinct. And the abalone are very important to the ecology of the area because they keep some of the predators at bay, and they maintain the health of the environment. So when they went away, it was a real problem. One of the labs began to develop a process to breed them, and then we have to move them from the breeding ground to where they're going to grow a little bit more, and then to where they're going to be released. And all that has to happen on a very tight schedule. We do this annual flight of quail chicks because the quail was hunted to extinction almost in Pennsylvania, so they decided to reintroduce it. The quail are grown in Georgia. They were transporting the quail by truck. You'd lose about 10 to 20% of them. Wow. Just the stress of the trip was so much, they just die. Yeah. Stress will kill the wild animals. So one of my Lighthawk pilots and a good friend took his G36 Bonanza and flew the quail from Georgia to Pennsylvania. And when they opened it, everyone was alive. They had 100% survival rate. And so those are the kind of things you can do with general aviation. You just can't do with anything else. One of the really great stories is the Mexican wolf. In the 70s, the population was down to about 10 or 11 existing in the world. I mean, those were all that were there out in the desert Southwest. U.S. Fish and Wildlife, along with Arizona folks, went out and captured them. And then through a long process of breeding and re-release, there's now 200 or 300 out in the wild and a couple hundred still in zoos. So, that population was right at the border of going extinct. And we've brought it back. That's a predator that occupies a portion of the ecosystem that is really quite critical. Yeah. Without it, things go haywire. The interesting part Lighthawk has played in that is they will take a Mexican wolf pup that is 1 or 2 weeks old and bring it out of its litter and fly it to the Southwest, and then they will put it on a backpack and hike it up to a den where a wild female wolf has just delivered, and they will stick it in with a den. It will be raised as one of its own. And we actually have some wild collared Mexican wolves that are named Lighthawk.
No way.
Because, they got delivered in the process. That's an interesting thing because you have to pick up the wolf in the morning and have it in place in the evening, and you're going across the country. So that's one of our turbojet pilots usually who does that.
Wow. Yeah, the timing
is
a very tight window there,
right?
yeah. Is there kind of a moment, I guess probably like a lot of people's early experience in flight training, like you mentioned in your solo, where you just get that first taste of aviation and it changes you forever. Do you see that in the people that, are part of the conservation efforts that go on these flights? Is that just like a transformative moment when they see the area of land they're studying or something for the first time from the air?
It absolutely is. And as we mentioned, there's 600,000 pilots in the U.S., 330 million people there.
Yeah.
So that ratio is not quite right. So most people have never been up in a general aviation airplane. That experience that as pilots we take pretty much for granted is completely novel for most people. And they come down with a different view and a different view of the world.
And what is that pipeline now for getting conservationists plugged into you guys? Do you guys do outreach, or is it word of mouth? What are the ways that people have found you guys in the past?
Largely word of mouth in the past. As I mentioned, we've got probably a market size of 3,000 organizations. So one of the new efforts in this coming year is a much stronger outreach to the conservation organizations. Because most of them, again, when you say, here's what we can do for you, and we do it at no charge to you, and they go, where have you been?
Yeah.
We're beginning to attract a little more press, both in the conservation side and the aviation side. So we're getting a little better known, but we've still got a lot of work to do there.
Is that an opportunity for people who maybe aren't pilots or conservationists to get involved as well, as to try to spread the mission, or if they know of some conservation effort, is that something people can do to help you guys?
Absolutely, because all conservation is local to a certain extent. So if you know of a problem that might benefit from being looked at from the sky, you can contact Lighthawk and say, hey, this is what's going on here. I just actually got a request from somebody to look at a stream that's badly polluted. Or you can contact the conservation organization and say, you need to get up in the air to see what's happening. And there's this organization called Lighthawk that can help you. So either way, it works well. Of course, we are a nonprofit, so you can contribute to the cost of running the organization. That's another way you can help, and we have a lot of people who help that way. There's a lot you can do. It's you can help build awareness of what the issues are, and then connect us with the people who can help.
Was there something that surprised you about the kind of mechanics of running a nonprofit versus your history in the industry?
You don't have quite the flexibility that you have in a for-profit operation. I've done several startups, grew them, and raised a lot of venture capital money. The not-for-profit, you're working with the desire to do something better, and people will contribute a tremendous amount just to make that happen. What you really need to do is to help people to stay motivated, to understand what they're doing and why what they're doing is really of value. There aren't any stock options to hand out in this world. So you look for other ways to motivate people and to keep them engaged.
Yeah, I'm sure the flying itself is a huge motivating factor. It's pretty surprising to me that, at least from my perspective, Lighthawk seems like a pretty well-guarded secret.
That is the problem, or a problem, and we're working real hard to solve that.
Yeah. Well, I want to know about some of these other efforts. We've talked about, the animal transport. I think that hits home for a lot of people. It's it's very tangible. But what are some of the other really cool conservation efforts around landscapes or preserving watersheds or coastlines? That's super interesting to hear about.
You most likely have seen pictures of the Colorado River, and a lot of those pictures that you're seeing were taken from Lighthawk aircraft. So we have flown a number of people over the Colorado River to see what that is. And it's not just the river, it's the reservoirs and what is going on from the headwaters all the way down to the delta. Right now, there are several proposals on how to solve the Colorado River problem. A lot of the agencies that we have worked with to give them access to the river and to understanding of what's going on, they put together a joint proposal that's probably the most coherent one that's out there.
Wow.
So we were proud to be a part of that. Smaller things. The Samish Indian Nation in the Pacific Oregon coast needs to monitor the bull kelp off the shore, because bull kelp is important to their traditions. And so we have this ongoing series of flights to take a look at that. And then land trusts by law have to monitor their property every year. And we can take an executive from the land trust, put them up in the airplane, and they can do 3 weeks of monitoring work in a day. So we do a lot of that. And we help our not-for-profit partners raise money. We had a land trust just several months ago that wanted to acquire a beautiful piece of land. They had a potential donor that said, yeah, I'm interested in. They put them up in a Lighthawk flight. The donor saw how wonderful that piece of land would be if it were properly preserved. He came down and he wrote a $3 million check to buy that piece of property. So it's the magic that happens, it's 2,000 to 4,000 feet above the ground.
It's pretty cool to hear you as the CEO are still, I'm not going to say boots on the ground, you're boots in the air, I guess, but it's cool to hear that you're still involved in these flights on a day-to-day. It's cool to hear a CEO be right where it's happening.
Part of that is the Air Force training and leadership. You lead from the front, so you got to be out there. And besides, it doesn't take much to get me into a cockpit of an airplane.
Sure, yeah. So, twist my arm.
Yeah, twist my arm. Particularly something like a PC-12.
Sure, full of wolves.
Yeah, full of wolves.
I want to know, what are some of the big advantages versus using drones and some of this other technology that has come out in the last 10 years? We've talked about, being up there in the aircraft is experience you can't have any other way. But are there maybe some unique equipment or, obviously transporting animals? What are some of those things that really distinguishes maybe drones and other aerial imagery versus being in the aircraft? We look at it as a 3-layered problem. You've got drones, you've got general aviation, and you've got satellites. And all of them are moving ahead very quickly. The satellite imagery is getting better and better. The resolution is getting better and better. It tends to be expensive right now. And the drones, you can do amazing things with drones. The partnership we're developing with a drone operator who's been doing this type of work for 10 years, he said, it's a postage stamp. Sure. He said, the area that I can cover with my drone is just so small. And that's the reason he's so excited about working with Lighthawk, because now we can give him that whole river. We can give him that whole shoreline. We can give him what he needs to do. But there's always that dynamic, and Lighthawk is looking at that constantly. And with the changes that the FAA has proposed to the airspace, drones may get a lot more complicated and they may get a lot more capable. But that's going to be commercial operators. You aren't going to find many individual owners owning those new generations of drones. They're just going to be too expensive. But we're always looking at how that trade-off works. And part of it may be using drones to ground truth some of the work that we can do. And because part of the work that we do in general aviation is to ground truth what people are seeing from the satellites. Sure. So you've got that whole mix that is very dynamic. Well, I also want to hear about your experience with soaring or flying gliders. Is there something that kind of sparked that interest, or was it something that brought you back into aviation?
When I had been away from aviation intensely for years, our family got into boating, and we ended up with a 53-foot sailboat. Actually, sailing and flying are not so different. That the sail is really nothing but a big wing, and you kind of scratch the same itch because you're dealing with the environment and the weather. But when I got back into aviation, I said, what do I really want to do? There was an American sailplane company called Schweitzer that was out of Elmira, New York, that for a long time made a lot of metal sailplanes and that were popular in the United States. And I was classmates with John Schweitzer at engineering school, and we went up out of Post Mills Airport in Vermont and flew a glider, and I was hooked. So when I finally had the chance to get back into aviation, I looked around and there was a very active gliding club, soaring club, close to where I lived. Soaring is the purest form of flying that there is. It is just so enjoyable and so much fun. It makes you a much better pilot. You learn to use your feet because you've got all that wingspan. So the adverse yaw as you go into a turn is extreme. And in front of you in a sailplane, you have this thing called the yaw string, which is this 6-inch piece of yarn that tells you whether you're perfectly coordinated. Flying with powered flight, you're really out there to overcome the air.
Yeah,
You're out there to overcome what is in the atmosphere. In soaring, you have to be one with it, absolutely. And you begin to look at the sky in a totally different way. You know, a power pilot will look out and see a sky full of cumulus puffy clouds and think, oh, bumps.
Right.
Right. I got to get. We'll look at it and think lift.
Right.
Because under every cumulus cloud is a thermal of rising air. And so the question is, can I get to that cloud?
Right.
You think about aviation in a totally different way. You become much more connected with the environment and with the weather around you. You watch the weather very closely. And then, you know, if you want to know where the thermals are, you look for where the hawks are. And I have already had the experience of soaring in a thermal with a hawk, and the hawk is out there, you know, flying off your wing, and he's looking back at you and saying, you know, for something so big, you don't fly very well. And a lot of our pilots have soared with eagles.
Wow.
And they say that is a really amazing experience. So you're much, much closer to pure flight. You know, you're always going down, and the rate at which you go down is often dependent upon how well you fly. And it also teaches you a lot about decision making, because
yeah, you don't have a second option.
You don't have a second. You're not going around.
Yeah.
And so you learn to be very aware of what your situation and environment is.
Do you think that's a reason that a lot of pilots go to soaring, is because it offers that kind of deeper level of mastery, deeper level of understanding?
I think that's what gets the pilots hooked on it. The power pilots who come to it, they just are entranced by what you have to do.
So when you go back into a traditional aircraft, is it like bittersweet? Do you like the variety between the two, or if you had a choice, would you always be in gliders?
I love the variety between the two.
Yeah.
They both have capabilities, and I'll do both for as long as I can. One nice thing about soaring is you don't need a medical.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So.
And you don't burn gas.
That's right, and you don't burn gas.
So after a lifetime of flying all kinds of different aircraft, what is, you know, the driving force for you now? What is the definition of a successful flight for you?
That's a good question. I've kind of narrowed it down because, you know, time is limited. So what do you really want to do with that time that you have available? It's really about three things. One is, have I moved the needle on conservation, you know, for my Lighthawk flying? Am I doing something that's worthwhile? You know, I have to rent that 172 to go fly that mission, so I want to make sure it's doing something worthwhile. Secondly, have I used, you know, my reservoir of experience to help some pilot become a better pilot? You know, I really enjoy instructing, both on the soaring side and on the power side. And thirdly, have I just gone and had some fun?
And on that same note, what are the things in aviation that have stayed the same for you? And maybe what has changed as well? I
was lucky enough, as I said, to get, I think, the best training in the world with the Air Force. And you approach flying in a different manner. The difference between a professional and amateur is not only in degree, but also in kind to a certain extent. And so I will always approach flying with that rigor. If I'm flying with somebody that doesn't use checklists, I don't fly with them again. You know, that's a simple indication. So that's stayed the same. What has changed is I used to think of aviation as mostly transportation.
Sure.
And now I can do much more with it. The pure transportation side of it, for me personally, has probably, you know, fallen pretty much off the horizon. Yeah. I don't have that Aztec anymore, which I really would like to have, but they're expensive airplanes. After
over 10,000 flights, 47 years, hundreds of partners, where do you see Lighthawk's legacy 10, 20, 30 years from now?
I think Lighthawk is going to continue to do what it does. I mean, the truth is you can only do so many things with an airplane.
Yeah.
And a lot of my friends are worried that the job of the pilot's going to disappear as the computers get. There will always be general aviation pilots, right? And we will always fly because it's such a wonderful experience. And I think that will last for a long time. And what I hope Lighthawk does is gets even more sophisticated in its ability to communicate what is going on in the earth. I think it's clear we will continue to take people aloft to get that emotional and visual and visceral impact of what they see on the land. I think that's where we're going to be 20, 30 years from now. maybe flying electric airplanes. Who
That
knows?
would be cool.
Yeah.
They got to figure out the range a little bit. And
Right, and to get the energy density of the batteries up a bit. We are currently looking at trying to talk to a couple of the electric aircraft companies to say, let's do a conservation mission together. The issue is that we can't fly our partners in experimental aircraft yet.
right.
So we're working on trying to solve that problem right now.
And that's a great angle for the electric aircraft.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the main one you hear is, oh, it's cheaper for training. It obviously doesn't use gas, but combining that with the
Right.
conservation effort,
Right.
it's the
There you
perfect
go.
use case. Once someone goes on a flight, whether that's their first time in an airplane or, they're part of ongoing conservation, what are the steps to turn that observation into action?
That's an excellent question because it takes a lot of work. Lighthawk looks at it in 3 steps. We fly the flight with the conservation partner, with the person who sees what's going on. And that's what we call an output. But what we want is then the outcomes out of that flight. What happens? Does the story get written? Are the photos published? Do people become more aware of it? And does that lead towards eventually what we want, which is impact? The water's clean, the river flows, the dam is taken out. After a person has had this experience, they need to figure out how to build that coalition that will make that happen. And we can work with them at that point. You find the local organization that is concerned about the particular problem you've been looking at. And there's always one there. You can talk to the local aquarium, the local zoo about who's involved in these issues. And then you can say, look, here's a service that can make you more efficient, more effective, and help you do your mission better. So give Lighthawk a call. Or you can, at the point those organizations are there, you can call up Lighthawk and say, hey, we got this problem. These are the organizations working on it. Why don't you get in touch with them? And one of our program managers will reach out to them and try to, there's an education process to say, look, here's what aviation can do for you. And usually that results in the request for a flight.
And so that goes as part of the pre-planning for a flight as well.
That's correct.
It's not, let's go on a flight and then we'll figure it out after.
Right.
There's a lot of research and planning, I'm sure, that goes into not just the flight.
Every one of our flights has, a Lighthawk flight has a purpose. And we try to make sure that everyone is leading towards that impact that we all want to have in the future.
Well, Jim, thank you so much for spending the day with us here in Austin. I'm inspired by the work you guys do. Your story is fascinating, and I think everyone will be inspired to hear the great work Lighthawk does. So thank you so much for joining us
It's
today.
been a pleasure, and it's always great to sit and talk with another pilot and to tell stories. Thank you. I really appreciate it.